Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. Viewers, thank you for joining us. My name is Fred Mifflin, President of the Canadian Club of Toronto, and your host today. Our club's tradition of profiling leading business, political, and cultural figures is second to none. At a time when the world is becoming increasingly inwardly focused, our Global Leaders series celebrates Canada's own business leaders who are taking bold steps at home and abroad to create opportunity and prosperity here in Canada, like our guest speaker today, Prem Watsa. Before I formally introduce Prem, here's a preview of some of our upcoming events. Next Wednesday, May 24th, National Chief Perry Bellegarde will be at our club. He will be joined by CBC Radio host Duncan McHugh to discuss reconciliation and the needs of First Nations communities. And on Thursday, June 1st, Evan Siddall, President and CEO of CMHC, will join us to talk about Canada's national housing strategy. To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at CDNCLUBTO or by following that hashtag. I want to express special thanks to today's event sponsors, BMO Capital Markets, represented by John Koch, and Tories LLP, represented by Kevin Morris. Thank you for your generous support. I also want to acknowledge the young leaders who are with us today, thanks to the support of Altius Minerals from Queen's University Smith School of Business. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. And now our guest speaker. Often called the Warren Buffett of the North, our guest speaker is followed by many for his market insights, his long-term investment philosophy, and his often contrarian investment strategy. Prem Watsa, founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Fairfax Financial, is known as a shrewd dealmaker and a value investor. A calculated risk taker, Prem is also a keen supporter of entrepreneurial spirit. Fairfax is focused on property and casualty insurance and reinsurance and investment management. With assets of almost $60 billion and a market cap of nearly $14 billion, at least as of yesterday, who knows, it is only natural that market analysts, economists, and business journalists keep a close watch on Fairfax's investment activities. One of Canada's most respected business leaders, Prem is a recipient of the Order of Canada and holds a chemical engineering degree from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology and an MBA from the Richard Ivey School of Business. Prem also has received several honorary degrees and awards, including degrees from Western University, the University of Toronto, and Wycliffe College, as well as the prestigious International Horatio Alger Award. He serves on the Sick Kids Hospital Foundation, chairing their investment committee, and is on the Richard Ivey Business School Advisory Board. Perhaps most important to Prem is his commitment to his family, his faith, and his charitable causes, which are too numerous to mention. So again, if you have any questions, please fill out one of the Q&A cards on your tables. One of our staff will be along to collect them, and then we'll address them to Prem at the end of his formal remarks. So Prem, welcome. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for that introduction, Fred. It's so nice to be here at the Canadian Club, and it's so nice to be in Canada. I'm an immigrant, as I'll tell you, and it's wonderful to be in Canada. Some people think of Canada as a plus, a lot of good things happening, and some people worry about all the negatives. And so it reminds me of this story that a family had twin boys, two boys, and who looked very similar to each other, but they were totally different. If one felt it was too hot, the other thought it was too cold. If one said the TV was too loud, the other claimed the volume needed to be turned up. So they were just opposite in every way. One was an eternal optimist, the other was a doom and gloom pessimist. So the father said, let me see what will happen if I take, if I go to the pessimist twin and give him all the gifts that money can buy, and the optimist twin, he gave him he loaded his room with horse manure. So that night, the father went to the pessimist room, and the pessimist twin was crying. He says, "Why are you crying?" the father said. He said, because my friends will be jealous. I'll have to read all those instructions before I can do anything. I'll have to need batteries, he says, and my toys will eventually be broken. So on and on, very, very negative. So the father goes to the optimist twin's room, and he found him dancing for joy in the pile of manure. So what are you so happy about? So the optimist twin said, I know there's a pony someplace. That's how I feel about Canada. There's always a pony someplace. As an immigrant to this great country about 44 years ago, I would never have thought I would one day stand up and speak to you. Because, of course, I came to Canada, as many, many immigrants have, with no money. But I was fortunate enough to have really good parents. And my father was an educator, and some of you, I think Fred would remember. Fred's been my neighbor for 30 years, so he would remember my dad and mom, and my family would have been very proud that I had a chance to address you. Fairfax is an entrepreneurial story. It's a story that has been repeated in Canada time and time again. And I wanted to share some thoughts with you on my own story so that it might help you and might benefit you, because it's not an exception story. It's a story that is open to anyone in this wonderful country of Canada. And so I was wanting to share my experiences and then open it up for questions with Fred. So when I arrived in Canada 44 years ago, I was, as I said, with no money, but my dad was a teacher and my mom looked after us. So I think of us, and I've used this expression before, that we won the ovarian lottery. I come from a country with a billion people, so to have a good father and mother is, you have to win that lottery. And we did, my siblings and I. My dad believed in education, so I was very fortunate to get an engineering education, as Fred said, at the IIT. And then there was only one place I could apply. I came to London, Ontario. My brother was there. There was one place I could apply and for a business education, and the one place was London, Ontario, of the Western Ontario, Ivy Business School today. And so I applied and I got in. And today I'm on their advisory committee, and the dean says, don't say that. This is a very good school. You can't just apply to one school and come in. But when I left Western, I was looking for a job, and it was difficult to get a job, as you can imagine. I'd been in Canada for about 18 months. So I had the interview at Ivy Business School at Western. All of the other good Canadian boys and girls were putting their resume, and I put mine too. And I get this is a really good friend of mine. Many of you know him, Jim Martin. He comes to interview me, and Jim says, very slowly, he says, "What is your name?" I said, "Mr. Martin." Now he's Jimmy, but at that time I said, "Mr. Martin, I do speak English." I was then called for a second interview, and attending the second interview with John Watson, who Jim Martin was kind enough to introduce me. And life changed for me because John Watson introduced me to value investing, Ben Graham, and he said, "Forget what you learned in school. It's the security analysis by Ben Graham. That's what you have to read. And I don't want you to talk about alphas, betas, efficient markets, and all of that." And it was tremendous, a fantastic experience. And lots of my friends today are from Confederation Life, the old Confed, was a training ground for a ton of us in the investment business. I was fortunate to have worked for John. And that was my introduction. My dad never bought a common stock, didn't know anything about business. I didn't either, other than this experience of working with John and where he introduced me to the investment business, Ben Graham. That's how the light clicked on. Long-term value investing, downside protection, margin of safety, all the things we take for granted today was, for me, right there. And I have often thought back and felt that I was very fortunate to have got this job. I could have got a job at a bank or another institution, and I would never have been exposed to Ben Graham. Those days, it was a very rare thing to be exposed to Ben Graham. Now, about 10 years ago, we began a course at the Ivy Business School called Value Investing, and now it's a lot more prevalent. And of course, Warren Buffett has made it very prevalent because he's a fan of Ben Graham also. For almost 10 years at the life insurance company, I worked there. Tony Griffiths is here. He's our lead director. Tony was a member of the board of Confederation Life there, and it was a wonderful company. I left there and I started a company called Prem Watsa Investment Counsel, and within a year, and totally unplanned, within a year, an opportunity came to buy a small insurance company called Markel Corp of Richmond, Virginia. They had a Canadian operation which was public, not doing well, close to bankruptcy, and I needed some money to help put this company back on a sound footing. And I approached some of the investors, and there was one investor that some of you might know who backed me, was a fellow by the name of Robert Hartog. And Robert Hartog he built a company called Waltech and had a terrific track record. And so I'd go, I'm nervous, I go and meet him for breakfast, and he says, "What were you looking to do?" And I said, "I'm looking for to put some money to buy this, to take control of this company." He said, "How much money do you need?" I said, $400,000. He said, "You've got it. Let's enjoy the breakfast." I said, "You want to see my notes?" And he said, "No, that's fine." And then I talked to another 6 of them, 6 investors. All of them signed up. I got $2 million. Then I had to get $3 million, which, by the way, is a lot of money. Those days, still a lot of money, but $3 million. Every bank said no. Every trust company said no. Every life company said no, till it suddenly struck, and all options were no. And the only option, and it never struck me that they would lend me money, is the old Confed. So I go there, and they said, "Sure, we'll look at it." Long story short, they lent me the money. I paid them back in 9 months. They hit me hard because of the 5-year loan, so I had to pay them a penalty for paying it off early. And they had 200,000 shares for free. That was the terms of the deal, and they did very well on those shares. But as I said, that's been my experience. That was the toughest money. We've raised a lot of money since that time. But that money, that $3 million, and I couldn't understand why a bank or an institution, life company wouldn't lend me the money. I gave them all the information, but think back, I'm 35 years old, no experience, didn't have a clue as to how to run a company. I had to ask Robert how you pass a resolution. I suddenly got on this board, and I'm chairman, and I'm saying, Robert, how do you pass a resolution? And you say, you got to do this. And John, you'll understand. But but that's how we began, and we had to. The name of the company was Markel Financial. It owned one insurance company called Markel Insurance Company, and we thought we should expand. And so we changed the name of the company to Fairfax. And you might wonder where we got that name from. That name was from our secretary. We went to the board, they came out with some fancy names. The management came out with some fancy names. But our secretary, she says, how about Fairfax? Fair, Friendly Acquisitions. F for friendly and AX. That's how the name came out. We thought it was a nice name. Our partners were from Fairfax County, Richmond, Virginia. They said, hey, that sounds good. It's Virginia. And so that's how that name came, and we've lived by that fair, friendly acquisitions. We've never done a hostile acquisition in 31 years. That's 1985. So when we took the company over 31 years ago, it had never made a profit of $1 million, capital of less than $10 million, after we refinanced it. Prior to the refinancing, it had zero capital. We refinanced it and had premiums or sales of about $10 million. So 31 years, long time today. Our company has the premiums of over $10 billion and shareholders' capital of $9 billion. And there's a tremendous focus on underwriting profitability, and our investments are managed with a long-term value-oriented philosophy. We measure our returns with book value per share, because that's what we control. So our book value per share is compounded at about 20%, and our stock price has compounded at about the same, 3.25 to about 600 and odd today. So when we look back, we say, I ask myself, because all we were trying to do was $10 million. We were trying to build a company which expands, doubles in about 5 years, and doubles again. So why did this happen? And I just wanted to share a few points, and then we'll open it up for questions. The major plus over this 31 years was culture. We have a wonderful culture that we've built, and I'm just one. A lot of our people are here, and Paul Rivette, that some of you know, is our president, and Rick Salzberg, and on and on and on. So our company is focused on providing outstanding customer service, which is what businesses are supposed to do. You exist only for your customers. You look after the employees who provide that service. In the free enterprise system, you have to make a profit. Long-term profit is how we consider that. And then you have to put back money, we think, into the community, because we don't live in a vacuum. So our whole company, before we refinanced, in the stock market in 1985 was worth $2 million. Stock was 3.25, 600,000 shares, about $2 million. When a company does well, in the last few years, we've been donating into the communities where we do business, 15 to 20 million, which is even, when I think about it, it's quite shocking. But that's what happens when a company does well. And if you're able to do all of this in the long term, then my suggestion to you is that business is a good thing. Business is a good thing. Business has built this country, built the United States over a long period of time. And I've read a fabulous book about a year ago by Michael Bliss, who's a great historian, called, believe it or not, 500 Years of Business History. From the first fishermen who came into Newfoundland to the furriers and on, 500 years, ending in 1987, I think it was. And it's a fascinating history of how Canada was built by business over this long period of time. To highlight for you, so I talked about culture, just to highlight a few principles. We have some guiding principles, and I just thought I'd highlight them for you very quickly. Everything we do is long-term. So we're a public company, but we've never provided any guidance, what will happen in the next 3 months or 6 months or a year. We're focused on trying to make 15% for our shareholders over the long term, not in any single year, but over time. So everything is done over the long term, and there's tremendous trust in our company that we will always do the right thing. You won't hear us saying, like you might have heard a company today or in the last few days, say they are going to fire 10% of the employees. A company publicly says they're going to lay off 10% of the employees. We've never done that. We never will do that. That's no way to treat your employees. We have a really good business guy who's had a terrific track record. He says if you knew the specific people, so they have 200,000 people, 10% is 20,000 people. If you knew those individual people, if you knew their families, you'd never be able to fire them. It's just because it's a general number, 200, you need to fire 10%, and that's how you do it. I tell our guys that you have to think of anyone you fire like it's your brother, your sister, so you have to take real good care of them. Sometimes you have to let people go. But when you do that, you have to be very careful. Our company, Fairfax, second principle is it's not for sale. So now I happen to have some multiple voting shares that help. My lead director, Tony, reminds me that, multiple voting shares. But I have said that it's not for sale. That means you can't pay, a sucker say $600 and you can't pay $1,200. I've told my shareholders for a long time that it's not for sale. But we can build our company over the long term, and which is what we're doing. We have an odd principle that in our guiding principles, an odd statement that we don't want to be successful at the expense of our families. We all have a different life, another life other than business, and we say we don't want to be we don't want to be successful at the expense of our families. We put that down to remind us, no guarantees in life, of course, but we put that down, and we work very hard, but not at the expense of our families. We are team-oriented and very fearful of people who have large egos and are arrogant. President Reagan had a lovely quote, which we believe in. Anything in the world is possible if you don't care who gets the credit. If you don't care who gets the credit, it's your idea, anything in the world is possible. Fairfax has seen that in action over 31 years. Finally, we have never compromised our integrity. Let me give you an example. Having shaken hands in an acquisition, we've never walked away from a commitment or gone back to change the deal. So once you have a deal, maybe subject to due diligence, we've never changed the deal. We say we're going to look at it, we're going to look at all the things you've told us, and if we find something that's different, then we come back to you. But we've never had to do that, never had to change the deal. Once I remember we bought a company after a great deal of negotiations. A year later, this is 1 year later, we get the frantic call from the CFO of the company we were buying this company from. And he said he had discovered a provision in the contract was costly, unfair to the company. So we reviewed it, agreed with him, and we made the necessary changes. Made the changes 1 year later, opened up the contract, made the changes, because he was right. 10 years later, that same CFO, 10 years later, had become the CEO of a large company with whom we were trying to negotiate a contract. And negotiations proceeded quickly and successfully because he hadn't forgotten 10 years ago that we had acted well. And so acting well by its own self is why you should do it, but there's a positive in the long term. Doing the right thing pays. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, business can be a calling if you look after the needs of your customers, your employees, and communities in which you operate, and finally make a return for your shareholders all over the long term. I have been blessed with mightily in my life with my wonderful wife, Nalini, who's right here, and we've been married for 43 years. and I want to recognize her. And we have 3 wonderful children, Ben, Christine, and Stephanie, and their spouses, Molly and Quinn, and we have 5 grandchildren. You know, I look at myself and say, we have been blessed mightily. And as my wife will attest, Fairfax has been a labor of love for us who lead the company. I just happen to be one. I have a strong faith. My thought always has been is that the good Lord owns everything, and we are just stewards of what He entrusts us with. So I have arranged my affairs so that even after my death, Fairfax will not be subject to a takeover and continue to be a Canadian company headquartered in Toronto, operating with our guiding principles, because the shares will not be sold. So I want to just end by acknowledging the many blessings that the good Lord has provided me over my whole life, and just to close with 2 quotations, and I've used them before, that have meant a lot to me, and perhaps you'll find them useful. First one was from my dad, who said, "Work as hard as you can, as though everything depended on you. Pray as hard as you can, as though everything depended on God." And the second, and it's my favorite quotation from the Bible, "What profited the man if he gained the whole world but lost his soul?" So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks very much, Prem. I was relieved when with your introductory story, that you talked about the pony being there and not the other thing in the room, so that was a highlight. So, again, if you have any questions, I've received some already, but we've got a good list here, and Prem has said nothing is off the table. I've looked at them, and a couple of them are a little racy, but this one is not. What can Canada do to make sure the next Prem Watsa can raise that initial $3 million to launch the next Fairfax?
That's a very good question. Very good question. I think, you know, you have these technology companies today, Fred, and there's a lot of money being raised in Waterloo and in Toronto, and so we have this. Canada was a risk-taking culture. I mean, I read this book which will blow your mind when you hear what they've done. In 1880, the Canadian Pacific built the railroad across Canada, right across Canada, and Vancouver and British Columbia were unknown. And how long did you think it took to build that railroad? 4 years. 4 years, the whole railroad was built. And it had, the other thing I noticed when I read this book is there were American interests and Canadian interests. Americans tend to be more risk takers. More money comes from the United States. We've had to raise a lot of money, and we've raised a ton of money in the United States and elsewhere, but in the U.S. But I think you know, by definition, when you start, it's a little tough. Like the old, when I got my $3 million, they had a gun. They had the closing dinner had a statue with this gun on my head, and they said, "You lose $3 million, and we're going to put you out of business. We don't want to hear anything. You lose $3 million." This guy was a friend of mine. You're gone. So we financed them real fast. But so I think it'll always be difficult, but a little more competition would help. But I think I really do think in Canada there's a ton of opportunity, there's a ton of possibilities.
Great. This one, there are a couple of U.S. questions here. After the U.S. election, you turned bullish on global growth. Where are you today?
I worry about Mr. Trump. I would probably have never voted for him. But if you examine his policies and you examine the talent base that he has, Wilbur Ross Commerce Secretary, the Treasury Secretary. These are all very, very, very smart people, and they've all worked together for a long time. And those economic policies, and they're threefold. One is cutting corporate taxes in the United States from 35% to 15%, which is like unheard of. The second is rolling back regulation, allowing business to flourish. And the last one is infrastructure spending. You just have to go to American airports and see that there's a lot of infrastructure spending and hospitals, bridges, all sorts of things. If they're able to do that, I think we could be in for a long period of growth. So when the United States does well, the rest of the world does well. We certainly do well in Canada. So it struck us that that's what might happen. Risks, of course, that are still prevalent, but we thought that might happen. And Mr. Trump, he's tough to predict. The least I can say about him is he's tough to predict. But we still haven't changed our minds that the United States is going to have significant growth, and we'll all prosper from it. But it'll be up and down. It won't be in a straight line.
Okay, thank you. So you're going to accuse me of just having made this question up on the spot, but it's not true. I actually haven't. What advice do you have for Donald Trump?
Easy. I think he's got that advice from 100 people, 1,000 people. Stop using that Twitter account. I mean, and second one is just stay quiet. This guy, Peter Drucker, is a great business guy. He said about presidents, politicians, when you become president, you're no longer campaigning. You finished your campaign. You are now the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Canada. You have to take all the facts in front of you, forget what you said. Now you've got all the facts, you've heard all of the information. Now you've got to make the best decision for the country. And, the problem with Mr. Trump is he's incorrigible. I mean, he doesn't listen to anyone. Those Twitter messages, I know some of the people there, no one checks them. He just sends them. He gets up in the morning and he sends them. It's not like some people have reviewed those Twitter messages. They just go. So he's a different... one more comment I may add. Someone said to me, a guy who founded Home Depot, he said, if America wanted a president who has incremental change, who would provide incremental change, they would have selected someone else. But he says, we're looking for transformative change, and this man might provide transformative change.
Okay, so still on the international theme. You've been involved in some pretty ugly restructurings. Ireland, Greece, perhaps others. What determines whether Fairfax will get involved?
Always, in anything we do, it's very sensitive to management. So we have in our head office 35 people. Across our companies, we have 22,000. So we're only as strong as our management. We got a very decentralized operation. So we got presidents who run our companies, and they're totally empowered to run the company, with the exception of investments in the property casualty business. You develop a float that's centralized, run from Toronto. I happen to be one of them involved in that. But otherwise, it's all decentralized, run by presidents. And you might find this interesting. In 31 years, we have never lost a single president. So in New York or in the United States, you get a little higher salary, a few more stock options, people leave. Well, they haven't left our company because they run it. It's a huge advantage. They run it. And secondly, compensation. And so when we have these presidents who run our companies, so when we did the Bank of Ireland restructuring, we went to Dublin and we met Richie Boucher. And Richie Boucher is a terrific executive. This is a 300-year-old bank. House prices, by the way, in Dublin, some of you might remember, went down 50%, 50. And every bank went bankrupt. The only one that survived was Bank of Ireland, and it is on the way to going bankrupt, meaning the government would have taken over. They don't go bankrupt. The government takes it over. And so we, with 3 or 4 other investors, saved it, but it was because of Richie. and it was a phenomenal success for us. And the country of Ireland in 2011 could not borrow any money. Forget Bank of Ireland, the country of Ireland. And after we put our money into with 4 other investors, $1.5 billion, then the country of Ireland could borrow $600 million on a line of credit. And they couldn't issue 10-year bonds. This is Irish 10-year bonds at 13, 14, 15%. Almost no one took it. They're issuing 10-year bonds today at less than 1%. The rates have just collapsed, and Ireland is coming back in spades. We think in Greece, Fred, that's yet to come. At the moment, we're taking a big hit on it, but we think over time that'll happen there too.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more question. I'm getting the nod. So this is an interesting one, and I apologize to people if I didn't get to your questions, but they've all been great questions. How do you reconcile shareholders' short-term and return expectations with the long-term goals of the companies you invest in?
So it's an interesting dynamic. In our company, we had our annual meeting in April. We had 2,000 shareholders attend, and without exception, they're all long-term shareholders. So I'd go and shake their hands, and they'd be like 5 years and 10 years and 20 years and 25 years. And just to, one particular investor, a man and his wife, I go and shake their hands, just saying hi, and where are you from? They're from Tennessee. And I said, how long have you been an investor? And he turns around and says, I think we're your largest individual investor. I said, you're our largest individual? I'd never heard of, didn't have the pleasure of meeting you. And so I asked him how much, and 400,000 shares. Our stock sells at 600. 400,000 shares is what they own. They've been coming, Fred, for 15 years, and they just come for the meeting. They meet all our presidents, they meet all our people, and they say we enjoy getting to know the company every year, and we take a long-term perspective. So we have always, there's no stock split, there's no promotion, it's all full disclosure in our annual report, pluses and minuses. So when you do that year after year after year, then if you're a short-term investor and you want to make a quick buck, unlikely you'll come to Fairfax. You'll go to the whole bunch of choices. It's like they say, if you serve Italian food, the restaurant serves Italian food, and Italian food in it. When you go there, you'll get Italian food. But if you do Italian food, French food, no one knows what you're doing. We serve Italian food or long-term value investing all the time, and we've done it for 31 years. And there's a side benefit. We are in the throes of buying a company, biggest company we bought, $5 billion, a company called Allied World. And the guy running it for 15 years has had an American, Scott Carmilani, outstanding track record. But here's the thing, he wanted to join our company. And so we benefited from the fact that he wants to join our company. We had to do, of course, to make sure that it was an appropriate price. They hired investment bankers and all of that. But the fact was he wanted to join our company, and we hadn't heard of him in the property casualty business, I hate to say. Met him, really liked him. And so we've got a whole ton of people over 31 years. We've never done a hostile deal. So we've got many, many people who want to join our company because of this culture. And so team-oriented, treating people well, culture that we've developed over this time. And that's what we want to maintain, because that's tough to copy. And that's tough. That's our competitive advantage, in a sense. But Fred, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Prem. And now I'd like to invite Canadian Club Director Anita McCourt to please formally thank Prem.
Mr. Watsa, on behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I'd like to thank you for participating in our Global Leaders Series today. We appreciate the insights you shared on what it takes to be a successful business leader and the need to be bold and take risks in our approach to growth for the future in Canada. It was enlightening and entertaining to hear your perspectives on Donald Trump and your thoughts on how Canadians may benefit from his proposed policies if he can make them happen. And your own leadership journey is truly exemplary. I actually had one of our younger staff members from PwC in my office the other day, and he was maybe 25 years old, and he was excitedly sharing his passion for finance and investing, and he said, you know, I've been following the careers of two people since I was in high school, Warren Buffett and Prem Watsa. So clearly you're an inspiration to an entire generation of Canadians up and coming, and there's certainly much that we can all learn from Fairfax's stellar record. And I'm so glad that you were able to shed some light on your winning approach with us today. So please accept our best wishes for your continued success. And before we conclude, let me extend another round of thanks to today's event sponsors, BMO Capital Markets, Torys LLP, and PwC. We'd like to thank mediaevents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's event. To learn more about the club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. And that concludes our program today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.